Duchess of Caldermere will surrender her keys before this hearing adjourns. Rowan's announcement struck the oak-paneled chamber before Helena had even been permitted to sit. The silver keys at her waist suddenly seemed heavier than iron, though it was the woman beside her husband who made Helena's breath catch. Lady Sabine Wycliffe wore Helena's chatelaine. The delicate chain of chased silver had disappeared from Helena's dressing room 3 days earlier. Now it hung against Sabine's black widow's gown, supporting a small pair of scissors, a vinaigrette, and an empty ring intended for the estate seal. Sabine touched it lightly. His Grace believed it prudent that I begin assuming responsibility. Before the evidence is heard? Helena asked. Your guilt has already been established, Rowan said. The Duke of Caldermere stood at the magistrate's table in a dark blue coat, one hand resting beside the document that would strip Helena of her household authority. He did not look angry. Anger might have suggested uncertainty. His expression possessed the cold finality of a locked door. Around them sat the county magistrates, neighboring landowners, and 2 representatives from the War Office. Sir Lionel Graves, the political patron who had promised Rowan a government appointment, occupied the chair nearest the fire. On the table lay a rolled military survey. Sir Lionel broke its seal. This map details the proposed road by which troops and artillery might be moved from Caldermere Harbour to the northern garrisons. A copy was recovered from men arrested for smuggling French brandy and military powder. Helena looked directly at Rowan. And because I prepared the original survey, you have decided I supplied the copy. Your engraver's mark appears upon it. So might my name, if the forger possessed sufficient ink. A few men shifted in their chairs. Sabine remained perfectly still. Sir Lionel opened the survey across the table. Helena recognized her father's measurements, her own revisions, and the distinctive curve with which she marked changes in elevation. It was a skill learned during childhood beside an engraving press, not an accomplishment society expected from a duchess. Rowan had once praised it. Caldermere's repaired roads had increased the estate's rents by nearly 1/5. Now that same skill had been fashioned into a noose. Helena leaned closer. Near the lower edge of the sheet, visible only when the paper caught the light, stood the faint outline of a crowned shield. Her pulse quickened. Turn it toward the window, she said. Sir Lionel frowned. For what purpose? The watermark. Sabine's fingers tightened around the stolen chatelaine. Rowan noticed Helena watching her. Nevertheless, he placed his palm over the corner of the map. This proceeding will not be delayed by one of your technical diversions. The paper can prove when the copy was made. That crowned shield was introduced by the Fenwick Mill only last year. My father's copper plate was destroyed 3 years ago. According to you, send for Mr. Fenwick. Give me 1 hour. I gave you 3 days to explain how your map reached smugglers. You gave me 3 days under guard without access to my papers. For the first time, discomfort crossed Rowan's face. He had personally ordered the archive locked, and Helena's correspondence seized. He had also received her written request for a paper merchant to inspect the survey. He had refused it. Sir Lionel leaned toward him. The ministry cannot appoint a man who allows domestic sentiment to obstruct a matter of national security. There it was, the hand beneath the glove. Rowan could postpone the judgment. He could summon the manufacturer or examine the remaining copper plates in Helena's workshop. Instead, he picked up his pen. Helena Harcourt is relieved of all authority over the Caldermere household, accounts, archives, and southern properties, he declared. Until a formal separation is settled, she will reside at Briar Cottage under supervision. Her mother's cottage, the one piece of Caldermere that should have remained beyond Sabine's reach. And the seal? Sabine asked softly. Rowan signed the order. It passes to you. His signature cut more deeply than the accusation. Helena had spent 7 years protecting his tenants, repairing his finances, and turning his neglected surveys into profitable roads. He had discarded all of it for the promise of a government chair. A clerk pushed the order toward her. Helena did not sign. Instead, she unfastened the ring of household keys and placed it on the table. The sound of silver against oak silenced every whisper. "You have made your choice publicly," she told Rowan. "You will correct it in the same manner, or live with it." His jaw hardened. "Remove her." As the bailiff approached, Helena turned once more toward the displayed map. Beyond the false watermark, another irregularity caught her eye. A proposed bridge drawn over Gannet Beck. There was no bridge there. There never had been. But Helena had drawn one that morning on 3 fresh copies of the military survey. Each copy contained a different invented feature, and each had been locked in a separate dispatch case, intended for one of the 3 people who could have manufactured the evidence against her. She left the chamber without struggling. At Briar Cottage, Helena found the locks broken and her father's engraving tools scattered across the floor. Sabine's men had searched everything except the false bottom beneath the old press. Helena opened it and removed 3 sealed dispatch cases. She sent the first to Rowan's steward, the second to Sir Lionel's secretary, and the third to Sabine's solicitor. Each contained what appeared to be a valuable secret concerning the proposed military road. Only one showed the non-existent bridge at Gannet Beck. Before dawn, Helena's elderly housemaid woke her with a visitor's card and a hastily written message. A London land agent wished to purchase the banks of Gannet Beck immediately. He was prepared to pay 4 times their value, provided the sale was completed before the Royal Canal inspector arrived. Helena read the agent's name twice. Then she examined the visitor's card beneath her brass magnifier. Pressed into its corner was a fresh impression of the Caldermere estate seal. Rowan had given Sabine authority only hours earlier, yet someone had prepared the card at least 2 days before the hearing. The accusation had never been intended merely to destroy Helena. It had been arranged to place the seal in Sabine's hands. Helena held the visitor's card near the single candle burning beside her bed. The seal impressed into its corner was not merely similar to Caldermere's. A shallow fracture ran through the hind leg of the engraved stag, a defect she had first noticed 7 years earlier while sealing winter relief orders for the northern tenants. No competent counterfeiter could have known it existed. The impression had been made with Rowan's genuine seal. "Where is the land agent?" she asked. Margaret Bell, her grey-haired housemaid, tightened her shawl around her shoulders. "In the parlour, Your Grace. He arrived alone, but there is a carriage waiting beyond the gate. No crest." "Did he give you his name?" "Mr. Elias Vane." Helena knew no London agent by that name. She dressed in the plain brown gown Sabine's men had left behind and slipped the card into her pocket. When she entered the parlour, the visitor rose too quickly. He was young, fashionably dressed, and ill at ease in clothing finer than his manners. Mud stained his boots, but it was pale chalk mud rather than the dark clay of the London road. He had come from the eastern coast, where the smugglers had supposedly been arrested. "Your Grace," he bowed, "forgive the hour. My principal wishes to purchase the banks surrounding Gannet Beck. Your principal makes investments before breakfast. He values discretion. Then he should not have sent a man who lies badly." Mr. Vane's eyes moved toward the door. Helena placed the sealed dispatch case containing the false bridge on the table between them. "You were told a military bridge would be built at Gannet Beck. You were also told that the surrounding land would increase sharply in value once the War Office announced its route. Neither fact appears in any authentic survey." The agent stared at the case. "I was instructed only to negotiate." "By whom?" "My client's affairs are confidential. So are military roads. Yet here you are." Helena let the silence tighten around him before continuing. "The land cannot be sold by me. Its ownership is governed by my marriage settlement." Any man familiar with Caldermere would know that. Mr. Vane recovered enough to smile. "Lady Wycliffe now possesses authority to dispose of the southern properties. Household authority is not ownership." His smile disappeared. That mistake told Helena more than a confession might have done. Sabine believed Rowan's order gave her power over every acre Helena had managed. Either Sabine had not read the marriage settlement, or someone had assured her its restrictions could be removed. "Tell your principal I will consider the offer," Helena said. "Return tomorrow at noon with the proposed deed and proof of funds. You have just said you cannot sell." "I said I cannot sell alone." The young man hesitated, uncertain whether he had won or entered a trap. Helena opened the parlor door for him. "Tomorrow, Mr. Vane, unless your principal fears daylight." Once his carriage had vanished, Margaret locked the door. "Will you truly meet him again?" "Yes. And this time we shall know whose money he carries." Helena returned to the hidden compartment beneath the engraving press. Beside the 3 dispatch cases lay her father's brass magnifier, 2 copper plates, and a narrow ledger bound in faded green leather. She had begun that ledger during the first year of her marriage, when she discovered Caldermere was losing nearly £2,000 annually through neglected roads, fraudulent grain measurements, and repairs charged twice. Rowan had laughed gently at first when she asked to examine the accounts. 6 months later, her drainage plan saved the eastern farms from flooding. Within 3 years, the estate's private revenues had risen enough to repair the harbour wall without borrowing. Every calculation appeared in the green ledger. More importantly, so did the legal source of every improvement. The Gannet Beck land had formed part of Helena's mother's marriage portion and was held in trust for Helena's separate use. Rowan could collect no rent from it, mortgage it, or sell it without the trustees' consent. Sabine's supposed authority over Briar Cottage was equally false. Yet the trustees were Lord Edwin Marsh, who had suffered a seizure the previous winter, and Mr. Percival Dane, Rowan's solicitor, the same solicitor to whom Helena had sent the 3rd decoy survey. She broke the seal on the remaining dispatch case and examined its contents. Dane's copy did not contain the bridge at Gannet Beck. It showed an invented limestone deposit beneath Alder Hill. The steward's copy contained a non-existent toll station on the northern road. Someone with access to Sabine's solicitor had either opened a different case or obtained Helena's bridge copy from another recipient. She checked the seals beneath her magnifier. The wax on Dane's case was undisturbed. The steward's case was equally intact, but the case intended for Sir Lionel's secretary had been returned by the messenger with a small notation claiming the secretary was absent. Its seal bore a hairline cut along the lower edge, carefully softened afterward with heat. The map inside showed Gannet Beck. Helena now possessed a route, but not yet a culprit. Any servant between Briar Cottage and Sir Lionel's residence might have opened it. She needed proof that could survive more than Rowan's disbelief. At sunrise, wheels ground across the frozen drive. Helena expected Sabine's bailiffs returning to complete their search. Instead, an old farm cart stopped before the cottage, and Thomas Reed, Caldermere's former surveyor, climbed down with his left arm bound against his chest. Helena had dismissed him from active work after a quarry fall 2 years earlier, but continued his pension from her private allowance. He valued her before she required anything from him. Now his face was bloodless, and dried mud covered one side of his coat. "They know about your 3 maps," he said, as Margaret helped him inside. "Someone followed your messenger from this house." Helena closed the door. "Who attacked you?" "I never saw his face, but he dropped this when my horse threw him." Reed produced a brass token marked with the emblem of the Royal Caldermere Canal Company. On its reverse was a number corresponding to one of Sabine's private subscription agents. Helena reached for the green ledger. "Why were you near Gannet Beck?" "Because I received an order carrying His Grace's seal. It instructed me to mark foundations for a military bridge before dawn." "There is no authorized bridge." "I know." Reed's expression changed from fear to shame. "That is why I refused. But Your Grace, they had already begun driving survey stakes into the bank, and every stake bore yesterday's date." Helena looked toward the window, where the first light exposed fresh carriage tracks in the frost. The false bridge had appeared on her decoy map only hours ago, yet Sabine's men had prepared the site a full day before Helena drew it. Her trap had not created their plan. It had accidentally reproduced a detail they already intended to make real. Somewhere, an authentic survey had been altered before the hearing, and the forged accusation against Helena was only the first step in giving that alteration legal force. Helena spread the green ledger, Thomas Reed's brass canal token, and the 3 decoy surveys across the kitchen table. If Sabine's men had placed stakes at Gannet Beck before the false bridge appeared on Helena's map, then the coincidence had only 2 explanations. Either the conspirators intended to build something there, or they intended investors to believe something would be built. Were the stakes positioned for a bridge? Helena asked. Reed shook his head. They formed a rectangle on the western bank, too narrow for an approach road and too far above the water. A warehouse? Perhaps, but the ground cannot bear one. Your drainage survey proved that. Helena remembered the measurements. Beneath a thin crust of gravel lay peat and waterlogged clay. A stone warehouse raised there would sink before its roof was completed. That made the proposed structure useless, unless its purpose existed only on paper. By 9 o'clock, 2 Caldermere carriages entered the cottage drive. Lady Sabine descended from the first wearing Helena's chatelaine and carrying the estate seal in a red morocco case. From the second emerged Percival Dane, the solicitor who served both Rowan and one of Helena's incapacitated trustees. 4 bailiffs followed them. You have no right to enter this cottage, Helena said from the doorway. Sabine glanced past her toward the engraving press. His Grace's order grants me authority over all southern properties. His order grants you authority over the ducal household. Briar Cottage is held in a separate trust. Dane unfolded a document. Lord Marsh has consented to a temporary transfer of management. Helena examined the signature attributed to the elderly trustee. The letters were unsteady, which would appear natural after his seizure, but the ink had pooled at every downward stroke. Someone had written slowly, while attempting to imitate weakness. When did Lord Marsh sign this? Yesterday afternoon, Dane replied. At his residence. Helena looked at the solicitor's boots. A small burr clung to one lace. Purple-headed burdock found along the lanes near Caldermere Hall, but not on the chalk road to Lord Marsh's home. Dane had not visited the trustee. The observation was useful but insufficient. A burr could be dismissed. A false signature required comparison. Then you will not object to my asking Lord Marsh to confirm it. You are forbidden to correspond without supervision, Sabine said. How fortunate that I need not write. Helena turned toward Margaret. Ask the vicar to send his curate to Lord Marsh. He may carry a verbal inquiry without violating any order concerning my correspondence. Sabine's expression sharpened. Stop her. The bailiffs hesitated. The cottage belonged to Helena's trust, and no document before them authorized the seizure of her servants. Sabine had gained Rowan's seal, but had not yet learned the boundaries of the power attached to it. Helena stepped aside and allowed Margaret to leave through the kitchen door. It was a small victory, but one witnessed by every man present. Sabine had gained Rowan's seal, but had not yet learned the boundaries of the power attached to it. Sabine had gained Rowan's seal, but had not yet learned the boundaries of the power attached to it. Sabine had gained Rowan's seal, without openly admitting she feared its answer. Search the house, Sabine ordered. The bailiffs entered. They opened cupboards, lifted mattresses, and carried Helena's remaining maps into the parlor. One man reached for the green ledger, but Helena placed her hand over it. Those accounts concern my separate property. Dane avoided her eyes. Everything relating to the canal must be surrendered. This ledger predates the canal company by 6 years. Then you have nothing to fear. That sentence is favored by people about to commit theft. Sabine removed the red morocco case from beneath her arm. She opened it, pressed Rowan's seal into a pool of wax on a seizure order, and handed the paper to the bailiff. As she closed the case, Helena noticed a thin crescent of pale wood lodged beneath the brass hinge. It resembled a shaving from a pencil. Draftsmen at Caldermere used graphite wrapped in string, not wooden pencils. The only wooden pencils Helena had seen recently came from a costly French set Sir Lionel kept in his study. She said nothing. Objects became evidence only when their movements could be traced. Instead, she released the green ledger and watched a bailiff place it inside a canvas document sack. He tied the sack with narrow red and white tape and sealed the knot with ordinary black wax. Helena fixed the details in her memory. 2 knots, 1 wax impression, and a dark stain shaped like a comma near the lower seam. "You have what you came for," she said. Sabine surveyed the room. "Not quite. His Grace has directed that your engraving press be removed before evening." For the first time, Helena's composure threatened to fail. The press had belonged to her father. More importantly, its iron frame concealed the surviving copper plates that could prove which marks had been copied and which had been invented. "The press is part of my mother's trust. Then Lord Marsh's consent settles the matter. If his signature is genuine," Sabine smiled, "by the time your curate returns, the press will be at Caldermere Hall." She turned to read. "And you are dismissed from all estate service. Your pension is terminated." "His pension is paid by me," Helena said. "Not by Caldermere." "With what money?" "Your accounts have been seized." Sabine's cruelty revealed the intended purpose of taking the ledger. Without it, Helena could not demonstrate which funds belonged to her trust, and Dane could present the southern revenues as part of Rowan's estate. The conspiracy was swallowing not only land, but the legal boundary between Helena's property and her husband's. At Caldermere Hall that afternoon, Rowan stood in his library, while Sabine reported that Helena had obstructed a lawful search. The engraving press had been placed against the far wall, its iron arms bound for transport to a warehouse controlled by the Canal Company. Rowan studied the false signature on Lord Marsh's authorization. He had seen the old man's handwriting dozens of times. The final loop in Marsh curved inward rather than out. "He signs his name differently," Rowan said. Sabine did not answer at once. Then she rested the red seal case on his desk. "A seizure changes a man's hand. You are searching for reasons to doubt because she is your wife. She was my wife yesterday as well. And yesterday, you nearly surrendered your appointment for her." Sabine moved closer. "Sir Lionel expects the canal deeds to be executed at tomorrow's subscription dinner. If Helena delays us, the ministry will regard you as weak." Rowan looked again at the signature. This was another moment in which he could stop what he had begun. He could send a rider to Lord Marsh or forbid the press's removal. Instead, he folded the authorization and returned it to Sabine. "Proceed." From the half-open doorway, Helena heard him. She had entered the hall under guard to inventory the press before its transfer. Rowan saw her and realized immediately that she had witnessed his choice. "The documents support Sabine's authority," he said. "No," Helena answered. "Your ambition supports it. The documents merely give you somewhere to hide." Sabine came to the doorway holding the canvas sack that had contained Helena's green ledger. The comma-shaped stain was still visible near the seam, but the red and white tape now passed through 3 knots instead of 2. Someone had opened the sack between Briar Cottage and Caldermere Hall. Sabine followed Helena's gaze, then drew the sack behind her skirts. In that brief protective movement, Helena knew 2 things. The ledger contained something Sabine had not expected, and Sabine finally understood that dispossessing the Duchess would not silence her. It had merely freed Helena to become her most dangerous opponent. Rowan did not return to the ballroom. He summoned the steward, the assistant librarian, and the footman who had received Sir Lionel's dispatch case 6 weeks earlier. The reserve key register showed no authorized withdrawal on the evening the copper plate disappeared. According to the assistant librarian, the case had been returned shortly after midnight by Sir Lionel's secretary, Mr. Julian Cross. It felt heavier than usual, but Cross had explained that protective boards had been added to prevent the plate from bending. Rowan ordered the empty case weighed, then instructed a servant to place one of Helena's surviving copper plates inside it, with 2 oak boards. The combined weight exceeded the recorded delivery weight by nearly 4 pounds. Helena's deduction had been correct. The military plate had never returned to the archive. "Send riders to Sir Lionel's residence," Rowan commanded. "Find Cross and bring him here for questioning." Sir Lionel stepped between Rowan and the door. "My secretary is already on his way to London. Then he will be stopped on the North Road. On whose authority? Mine. Inside Caldermere, perhaps. Not once he reaches the king's highway. Sir Lionel's calmness carried a warning. Detaining the secretary of a government patron without a magistrate's warrant could become a political scandal, particularly while Helena remained accused of leaking military information. Rowan sent for Magistrate Bellamy. By the time Bellamy arrived, Sabine had produced a letter supposedly found inside Helena's confiscated green ledger. It instructed an unnamed printer to alter the canal prospectus, create 3 conflicting surveys, and circulate false rumors about unstable ground until land values collapsed. The letter ended with Helena's initials. Rowan passed it to her. "Did you write this?" Helena read it once. The phrases imitated her formal style, but the content revealed ignorance of her methods. No cartographer would call them conflicting surveys. We would identify revisions by date, scale, and plate. Whoever wrote this knows my actions but not my language. Magistrate Bellamy examined the page. The hand resembles yours. Then compare it with my letters under magnification. The pen lifts will betray imitation. Sabine gestured toward the letter's broken seal. It was found among her private accounts. "In a sack you opened after seizing it," Helena replied. "The custody was broken before the document reached this house." Sabine's gaze flickered. Rowan noticed. "How do you know the sack was opened?" "It left Briar Cottage tied with 2 knots and sealed in black wax. It arrived here with 3 knots. The lower seam bears a comma-shaped stain. Ask the bailiff who packed it." The bailiff was brought in. He confirmed Helena's description, but admitted the sack had been out of his sight for several minutes when Sabine's carriage stopped to repair a loosened wheel. Sabine had remained inside the carriage with the documents. "I was reviewing material connected to a national security investigation," she said. "I did not insert that letter, but you had the opportunity," Helena answered. Sir Lionel placed a second paper before the magistrate. It was a sworn statement signed by Julian Cross before his departure. Cross claimed Helena had secretly instructed him to remove the military plate, promising to reward him after the canal company failed, and the southern lands could be repurchased cheaply through an intermediary. The statement also accused Matthew Pike of stealing a proof from his master's shop at Helena's request. "Convenient," Helena said. "Your secretary fled before he could be questioned, and left behind precisely the testimony you required. He departed on War Office business arranged last week," Sir Lionel replied. "You may confirm the travel order." The order was genuine. Sabine had prepared the escape before Helena's trap, just as she had prepared Mr. Vane's visitor card before receiving Rowan's seal. The conspiracy's timetable extended far beyond the hearing. Magistrate Bellamy turned to Rowan. "Until Cross and the apprentice are examined, the evidence points in both directions. I cannot issue a warrant against Sir Lionel's secretary on the Duchess's allegation alone. Then issue one to search his London rooms," Rowan said. "I cannot authorize a search outside this county. Send the request to a London magistrate." Sir Lionel's expression cooled. "If you accuse my secretary publicly, the War Office will suspend its support for the canal and withdraw your appointment. You will also announce to every investor that Caldermere cannot protect restricted military material." Rowan looked toward Helena. "Where is Matthew Pike?" "Safe. Bring him here." "No. His proof may clear you. It may also get him killed." "You expect me to accuse Sir Lionel's secretary while concealing the only witness who supports your account? I expect you to protect a frightened boy before demanding that he enter a house controlled by the people he accuses." Rowan ordered Helena to name Matthew's refuge. She refused. The disagreement gave Sabine exactly what she needed. "She is obstructing a magistrate and hiding an apprentice accused of theft," Sabine said. "Whatever the boy carries may have been created at her direction." Helena turned to Rowan. "Send Bellamy, the physician, and 2 neutral constables to collect him. Exclude Sabine, Sir Lionel, and every Caldermere servant. I will disclose the place to the magistrate privately." It was a reasonable safeguard. Rowan knew it. Bellamy agreed. But Sir Lionel leaned close enough that only Rowan, Helena, and Sabine heard him. "If that boy repeats this accusation, my support ends tonight. The ministry will investigate your wife, your seal, your archives, and every military contract attached to your title. Caldermere will become a synonym for treason before Cross is ever questioned. Rowan had spent a decade rebuilding the political standing his father's scandals had destroyed. Helena saw the old wound beneath his ambition, his terror that one woman's alleged disgrace would again make his name contemptible. He could protect Matthew and pursue evidence, or he could preserve his appointment by accepting the version already prepared for him. Rowan took the canal authorization from the table. "The subscription test will proceed tomorrow," he said. "Until its result, no investor funds will be released. But management of the project must be placed beyond domestic dispute." He signed an instrument appointing Sir Lionel temporary controller of the canal company and granting him authority to issue preliminary construction bonds under Rowan's personal guarantee. Sabine would retain the estate seal for canal business. Helena stared at the signature. Rowan had just given the two principal suspects control of the project and made Caldermere responsible for every debt they created. "Do not do this," she said. "If the subscriptions cannot be collected, those bonds will be secured against the unentailed southern revenues. Your trustee must consent to any claim against your property. One trustee is unconscious, and you have just detained the other for using his name. That is not protection. It is the opening they manufactured." Rowan's hand paused, but he did not revoke the instrument. Worse followed. At Sir Lionel's insistence, he signed a formal complaint accusing Helena of concealing a material witness and obstructing the investigation into the stolen plate. Magistrate Bellamy refused to commit a duchess to gaol without further testimony, but he placed Helena under guarded confinement at Briar Cottage and prohibited her from removing documents or communicating with canal investors. Rowan could have accepted her proposal to let neutral constables protect Matthew. Instead, he chose control over verification. Helena looked at the man who had once trusted her to restore his estate and understood that saving their marriage was no longer compatible with saving the people his signature endangered. "You have mistaken my restraint for dependence," she said. "From this moment, I will protect my property, Matthew, and the tenants. If that destroys your appointment, your canal, or what remains of your name, the choice was yours." She gave Bellamy the vicarage address in a sealed note, conditional upon Matthew being moved under the magistrate's personal protection. Then she returned to Briar Cottage under guard. Margaret was waiting with worse news. Someone had entered the vicarage through the vestry, but Matthew had escaped through the churchyard carrying the proof sheet. On the altar he had left a hurried message for Helena. Cross had not gone toward London. Matthew had seen him boarding a canal company carriage bound for Gannet Beck. Beneath the message lay a printed construction order, dated the following morning. It authorized the demolition of the old river embankment to make way for the imaginary bridge. If the embankment was breached at high tide, the water would sweep through 3 tenant farms and erase the unstable ground before the independent soil test could expose the fraudulent prospectus. Rowan's new instrument gave Sir Lionel the authority to order it. Sabine's seal made it appear lawful, and Helena's confinement prevented her from warning the investors. The larger scheme was no longer waiting upon documents. It would begin at dawn, with men carrying picks and blasting powder toward Gannet Beck. Rowan did not return to the ballroom. He summoned the steward, the assistant librarian, and the footman who had received Sir Lionel's dispatch case 6 weeks earlier. The reserve key register showed no authorized withdrawal on the evening the copper plate disappeared. According to the assistant librarian, the case had been returned shortly after midnight by Sir Lionel's secretary, Mr. Julian Cross. It felt heavier than usual, but Cross had explained that protective boards had been added to prevent the plate from bending. Rowan ordered the empty case weighed, then instructed a servant to place one of Helena's surviving copper plates inside it, with 2 oak boards. The combined weight exceeded the recorded delivery weight by nearly 4 pounds. Helena's deduction had been correct. The military plate had never returned to the archive. "Send riders to Sir Lionel's residence," Rowan commanded. "Find Cross and bring him here for questioning." Sir Lionel stepped between Rowan and the door. "My secretary is already on his way to London. Then he will be stopped on the North Road. On whose authority? Mine. Inside Caldermere, perhaps. Not once he reaches the king's highway. Sir Lionel's calmness carried a warning. Detaining the secretary of a government patron without a magistrate's warrant could become a political scandal, particularly while Helena remained accused of leaking military information. Rowan sent for Magistrate Bellamy. By the time Bellamy arrived, Sabine had produced a letter supposedly found inside Helena's confiscated green ledger. It instructed an unnamed printer to alter the canal prospectus, create 3 conflicting surveys, and circulate false rumors about unstable ground until land values collapsed. The letter ended with Helena's initials. Rowan passed it to her. "Did you write this?" Helena read it once. The phrases imitated her formal style, but the content revealed ignorance of her methods. No cartographer would call them conflicting surveys. We would identify revisions by date, scale, and plate. Whoever wrote this knows my actions but not my language. Magistrate Bellamy examined the page. The hand resembles yours. Then compare it with my letters under magnification. The pen lifts will betray imitation. Sabine gestured toward the letter's broken seal. It was found among her private accounts. "In a sack you opened after seizing it," Helena replied. "The custody was broken before the document reached this house." Sabine's gaze flickered. Rowan noticed. "How do you know the sack was opened?" "It left Briar Cottage tied with 2 knots and sealed in black wax. It arrived here with 3 knots. The lower seam bears a comma-shaped stain. Ask the bailiff who packed it." The bailiff was brought in. He confirmed Helena's description, but admitted the sack had been out of his sight for several minutes when Sabine's carriage stopped to repair a loosened wheel. Sabine had remained inside the carriage with the documents. "I was reviewing material connected to a national security investigation," she said. "I did not insert that letter, but you had the opportunity," Helena answered. Sir Lionel placed a second paper before the magistrate. It was a sworn statement signed by Julian Cross before his departure. Cross claimed Helena had secretly instructed him to remove the military plate, promising to reward him after the canal company failed, and the southern lands could be repurchased cheaply through an intermediary. The statement also accused Matthew Pike of stealing a proof from his master's shop at Helena's request. "Convenient," Helena said. "Your secretary fled before he could be questioned, and left behind precisely the testimony you required. He departed on War Office business arranged last week," Sir Lionel replied. "You may confirm the travel order." The order was genuine. Sabine had prepared the escape before Helena's trap, just as she had prepared Mr. Vane's visitor card before receiving Rowan's seal. The conspiracy's timetable extended far beyond the hearing. Magistrate Bellamy turned to Rowan. "Until Cross and the apprentice are examined, the evidence points in both directions. I cannot issue a warrant against Sir Lionel's secretary on the Duchess's allegation alone." "Then issue one to search his London rooms," Rowan said. "I cannot authorize a search outside this county. Send the request to a London magistrate." Sir Lionel's expression cooled. "If you accuse my secretary publicly, the War Office will suspend its support for the canal and withdraw your appointment. You will also announce to every investor that Caldermere cannot protect restricted military material." Rowan looked toward Helena. "Where is Matthew Pike?" "Safe. Bring him here." "No. His proof may clear you. It may also get him killed." "You expect me to accuse Sir Lionel's secretary while concealing the only witness who supports your account? I expect you to protect a frightened boy before demanding that he enter a house controlled by the people he accuses." Rowan ordered Helena to name Matthew's refuge. She refused. The disagreement gave Sabine exactly what she needed. "She is obstructing a magistrate and hiding an apprentice accused of theft," Sabine said. "Whatever the boy carries may have been created at her direction." Helena turned to Rowan. "Send Bellamy, the physician, and 2 neutral constables to collect him. Exclude Sabine, Sir Lionel, and every Caldermere servant. I will disclose the place to the magistrate privately." It was a reasonable safeguard. Rowan knew it. Bellamy agreed. But Sir Lionel leaned close enough that only Rowan, Helena, and Sabine heard him. "If that boy repeats this accusation, my support ends tonight. The ministry will investigate your wife, your seal, your archives, and every military contract attached to your title. Caldermere will become a synonym for treason before Cross is ever questioned. Rowan had spent a decade rebuilding the political standing his father's scandals had destroyed. Helena saw the old wound beneath his ambition, his terror that one woman's alleged disgrace would again make his name contemptible. He could protect Matthew and pursue evidence, or he could preserve his appointment by accepting the version already prepared for him. Rowan took the canal authorization from the table. "The subscription test will proceed tomorrow," he said. "Until its result, no investor funds will be released. But management of the project must be placed beyond domestic dispute." He signed an instrument appointing Sir Lionel temporary controller of the canal company and granting him authority to issue preliminary construction bonds under Rowan's personal guarantee. Sabine would retain the estate seal for canal business. Helena stared at the signature. Rowan had just given the two principal suspects control of the project and made Caldermere responsible for every debt they created. "Do not do this," she said. "If the subscriptions cannot be collected, those bonds will be secured against the unentailed southern revenues. Your trustee must consent to any claim against your property. One trustee is unconscious, and you have just detained the other for using his name. That is not protection. It is the opening they manufactured." Rowan's hand paused, but he did not revoke the instrument. Worse followed. At Sir Lionel's insistence, he signed a formal complaint accusing Helena of concealing a material witness and obstructing the investigation into the stolen plate. Magistrate Bellamy refused to commit a duchess to gaol without further testimony, but he placed Helena under guarded confinement at Briar Cottage and prohibited her from removing documents or communicating with canal investors. Rowan could have accepted her proposal to let neutral constables protect Matthew. Instead, he chose control over verification. Helena looked at the man who had once trusted her to restore his estate and understood that saving their marriage was no longer compatible with saving the people his signature endangered. "You have mistaken my restraint for dependence," she said. "From this moment, I will protect my property, Matthew, and the tenants. If that destroys your appointment, your canal, or what remains of your name, the choice was yours." She gave Bellamy the vicarage address in a sealed note, conditional upon Matthew being moved under the magistrate's personal protection. Then she returned to Briar Cottage under guard. Margaret was waiting with worse news. Someone had entered the vicarage through the vestry, but Matthew had escaped through the churchyard carrying the proof sheet. On the altar he had left a hurried message for Helena. Cross had not gone toward London. Matthew had seen him boarding a canal company carriage bound for Gannet Beck. Beneath the message lay a printed construction order, dated the following morning. It authorized the demolition of the old river embankment to make way for the imaginary bridge. If the embankment was breached at high tide, the water would sweep through 3 tenant farms and erase the unstable ground before the independent soil test could expose the fraudulent prospectus. Rowan's new instrument gave Sir Lionel the authority to order it. Sabine's seal made it appear lawful, and Helena's confinement prevented her from warning the investors. The larger scheme was no longer waiting upon documents. It would begin at dawn, with men carrying picks and blasting powder toward Gannet Beck. Helena read Matthew's message twice, then held the construction order close to the lamp. The document authorized demolition at 6 in the morning, 40 minutes before high tide. It bore Sabine's genuine seal impression and cited the authority Rowan had granted Sir Lionel only hours earlier. Yet the printed date showed the order had been prepared the previous day. Sir Lionel had known Rowan would sign before Rowan himself had decided to do it. "How many guards are outside?" Helena asked. "2 at the front, and 1 near the stable," Margaret replied. "The magistrate's constable is still here as well. He came to move Matthew and refuses to leave until he has questioned you." That distinction mattered. Rowan's men guarded Helena, but Magistrate Bellamy's constables served the law. Helena carried the order into the parlor and placed it before Constable Aaron Cobb. "This is evidence of an imminent act that may kill tenants," she said. "If you prevent me from warning them after reading it, you become responsible for the result." Cobb was a broad, deliberate man who disliked being hurried. He read the order, compared its date with Rowan's newly signed authorization, and frowned. It may be another forgery. Then stopping the demolition harms no one. Ignoring it may drown 3 farms. One of Rowan's guards moved toward the paper. Cobb folded it and placed it inside his coat. No one touches this until Magistrate Bellamy sees it. Bellamy is 5 miles away. The tide will not wait for his opinion. Helena drew a rough plan of Gannet Beck on the back of an old household bill. Her father had taught her that water obeyed level, pressure, and obstruction, never rank. The conspirators intended to blast the central embankment and allow the tide to scour away the peat. Afterward, they could claim the flood had exposed or destroyed the ground before a proper test. The canal company would collect insurance, demand emergency construction funds, and blame the disaster on Helena's neglected drainage works. "We need not reach the demolition site first," she said. "We need to open the north sluice before the tide rises. It will divert the first surge into the abandoned salt meadow." "That meadow belongs to your trust," Margaret said. "The winter barley was planted last month." Helena knew exactly what opening the sluice would cost her. The crop, the pasture fencing, and perhaps a year of rental income would be destroyed. But the alternative was water tearing through cottages where 11 children slept. "Wake every tenant between here and the beck," she said. Rowan's guards blocked the door. "Her Grace is forbidden to communicate with estate tenants," their sergeant said. Cobb turned on him. "She is warning them of a suspected flood, not soliciting canal shares. If you obstruct a constable responding to danger, explain it to Bellamy yourself." The sergeant yielded, but he refused to release Helena. She accepted the boundary rather than waste time fighting it. Margaret rode toward the farms with Cobb, while Thomas Reed took the old footpath to the northern sluice. Helena remained at Briar Cottage beneath guard, able only to calculate the tide's progress by the clock and listen for distant horses. At Caldermere Hall, Rowan received her warning shortly after 5. He immediately ordered Sabine to surrender the estate seal. She did so without protest. "Sir Lionel required it for the construction papers," she said. "I sealed what he placed before me under the authority you granted." Rowan sent riders to countermand the demolition. 20 minutes later, the first returned. Sir Lionel's crews carried an order bearing Rowan's personal guarantee and refused to obey any verbal instruction. "Then take them a written revocation," Rowan said. His secretary hesitated. "The temporary control instrument states that construction authority remains irrevocable for 48 hours unless terminated by 2 canal directors. Mr. Dane is confined, and Sir Lionel is the other named director." Rowan seized the instrument and found the clause above his own signature. He had read the first page but not the schedule attached beneath it. "Sabine, did you know this was included? Dane prepared the papers. Dane was under guard when I signed them. Then Sir Lionel must have added the schedule." Rowan could command servants, tenants, and estate officers, but he could not instantly cancel a commercial authority he had voluntarily granted, especially while contractors claimed payment under it. His signature had transformed sabotage into an apparently lawful operation. He sent armed men to halt the work without force, unless lives were immediately endangered, then rode for Gannet Beck himself. Helena heard the first explosion at 23 minutes past 6. It arrived as a low concussion that shook dust from the cottage rafters. A second blast followed. Beyond the eastern windows, birds rose from the fields in a dark, disordered cloud. One of the guards whispered a prayer. Helena stood with both hands pressed against the table, imagining the tide striking the broken embankment. Minutes later, a farm boy galloped into the yard. "The north sluice opened," he shouted. Mrs. Bell reached the lower cottages. "Everyone is climbing toward the chapel hill." "And the salt meadow?" Helena asked. The boy lowered his eyes. "Under water, Your Grace. The barley is gone." Helena closed them briefly. She had sacrificed the most dependable income belonging to her separate trust, but the tenants were alive. What of Gannet Beck? The first charge broke the center wall. The Duke arrived before the third. His men stopped the powder cart, but the water was already through. By mid-morning, The consequences could be counted. 2 cottages had collapsed after their occupants escaped. Reed suffered a deep cut while forcing the rusted sluice wheel. 30 acres of Helena's barley lay beneath salt water. The warehouse site had been scoured into a black basin of peat, publicly disproving the limestone claim. But Sir Lionel had vanished. So had the company's portable cash box and nearly £8,000 in advance deposits collected privately before Rowan suspended payments. The Bristol banker had withheld his money, but several distant investors had paid through agents who never attended the dinner. Because Rowan had personally guaranteed the preliminary bonds, Caldermere now owed the contractors for the demolition that damaged its own land. Rowan returned to the hall soaked to the waist and carrying the body of a canal labourer injured by the second blast. The man still lived, but his leg was crushed. Rowan's promised government appointment was withdrawn before noon. Sir Lionel's messenger had already reached the War Office with a report accusing the Duke of losing control of both his wife and a military project. Political ruin arrived faster than the flood. Rowan came to Briar Cottage that afternoon, expecting Helena to help reconstruct the canal accounts. She received him in the parlour, while Cobb stood as witness. "Your ledger contains the subscription records," Rowan said. "Sabine claims several pages were missing when it was seized. They were present when the sack left this house. Then help me prove it. I will help the injured labourers and the displaced tenants. I will not repair your political position or absorb debts created by the authority you gave Sir Lionel." He flinched, but she continued. "Return my ledger, my press, and every object taken from this cottage. Place Sabine under the same restriction you placed upon me. Then I will provide Bellamy with an independent account of the canal fraud. Sabine has disappeared." Rowan set the red Morocco seal case on the table. It was empty. The seal she had surrendered at dawn was a brass copy. Helena examined the case's lining and found a narrow compartment beneath it. Inside lay a folded list of 6 properties, including Briar Cottage and all 3 flooded farms. Each had been pledged as security for canal bonds in documents dated 3 weeks earlier. Lord Marsh's false consent appeared beside Helena's imitated signature. At the bottom stood a departure time, the packet ship Mercy Jane, sailing from Caldermere Harbour at 4 the following morning. Sir Lionel and Sabine had not merely stolen deposits, they intended to carry the forged bonds to Amsterdam, sell them through a foreign banking house, and leave Helena's land liable for repayment. Once the ship entered open water, recovering the documents or the money would become nearly impossible. Helena folded the list and gave it to Cobb, establishing its custody before Rowan could touch it. The packet sailed in less than 16 hours. Matthew remained missing somewhere near the conspirators' route, and the only road to Caldermere Harbour had just been cut in 2 by the flood. Helena did not waste time attempting to reopen the flooded road. Her father's original harbour survey showed a route no carriage map recorded, an abandoned salt workers' causeway running across the western marsh to a fisherman's landing below St. Oran's Chapel. At low tide, it could be crossed on horseback for less than 40 minutes. At high tide, it vanished beneath 6 feet of water. Low tide would begin shortly before midnight, leaving a narrow interval in which riders could reach the harbour before the Mercy Jane sailed. "I will guide Bellamy's constables across the causeway," Helena said. "You are confined to this cottage," Rowan replied, "by a complaint you signed. Withdraw it." Bellamy imposed the restriction, "At your request, on testimony supplied by men who have now fled." Cobb cleared his throat. "His Grace may formally retract his complaint, but only the magistrate can lift the order." "Then bring Bellamy here," Rowan commanded. "No," Helena said. "Request his presence. You have issued enough commands in matters where your authority is not absolute." Rowan stared at her, then accepted the correction without protest. Cobb rode for the magistrate while Helena established a base of action at St. Oran's Vicarage. The chapel hill stood above the floodwater, its schoolroom large enough to shelter the displaced families, and its vestry secure enough to hold documents. Helena used the remaining money from her private allowance to purchase food, blankets, lamp oil, and medicine. She recorded every expenditure in a new ledger witnessed by the vicar and 2 tenant representatives. No Caldermere officer controlled the room, the supplies, or the accounts. When Rowan arrived with her engraving press and the confiscated papers, Helena met him at the schoolroom door. The green ledger first. He gave it to her. Several pages had been cut from its center. The missing leaves contained the original drainage calculations and a schedule of revenues belonging to my trust. I did not remove them, I know, but you gave the person who did the authority to seize them. Rowan placed the 3 surviving copper plates on the table. The reserve key register is also missing. Of course it is. The steward remembers Cross asking where the key cabinet was kept. Memory will not prove he used it. No. Rowan glanced at the family sleeping beneath borrowed blankets. I should have listened when you asked me to establish the plate's custody. Helena did not answer his remorse. Regret had value only when it altered conduct. If we cooperate tonight, these are my terms. Bellamy commands the constables. I determine the route. Every recovered document goes first into his evidence case, not your library. Matthew receives protection and no charge of theft. You will not bargain with Sir Lionel to preserve your appointment. The appointment is already gone, then the sacrifice should be easier. Rowan absorbed the rebuke. Agreed. Magistrate Bellamy arrived before dusk and lifted Helena's confinement after reviewing the predated demolition order, Cobb's account, and the forged bonds list. He also issued warrants for Sabine, Sir Lionel, and Cross on suspicion of forgery, fraud, theft of restricted property, and conspiracy to cause malicious damage. Helena then examined the red Morocco seal case beneath her brass magnifier. The lining contained grains of pale sand and a dark green fiber. Caldermere Harbour possessed grey shingle, not pale sand. The fiber matched the baize used by the Royal Caldermere Canal Company to cover document tables. The genuine seal was stored in this case at the company office before Sabine exchanged it for the brass copy, she said. If the bonds were sealed there, someone may have witnessed it. Thomas Reed, pale from blood loss, but unwilling to remain in bed, remembered that a night watchman named Josiah Crane guarded the canal office. The company had dismissed him 3 days earlier for alleged drunkenness. Helena knew his wife from the tenant's infirmary and sent Margaret to find them. Crane arrived after nightfall carrying a small wooden tally board. I was not drunk, he said. I objected when Lady Sabine brought 6 blank bonds for His Grace's seal. Mr. Cross pressed the seal while Sir Lionel held the wax. They dismissed me and altered the watchbook to say I had abandoned my post. Each time a document entered or left the canal office, Crane had cut a notch into the tally board and copied its number into the official watchbook. On the night of the sealing, he had cut 6 additional notches. The altered book might conceal them, but the board preserved the physical count. Helena placed it inside Bellamy's evidence case. The vicar, Crane, and Cobb signed a custody statement before the lid was sealed. They now had a witness, an ordinary object created before the conspiracy, and a record against which its notches could be tested. Yet Crane delivered more troubling news. The Mercy Jane is not carrying them, he said. Sir Lionel paid its captain to list 2 false passengers. Lady Sabine and Cross mean to leave aboard the revenue cutter, Argent, which sails at 2. A revenue cutter could depart regardless of the tide and would attract less suspicion than a packet ship hurriedly carrying fugitives. Sir Lionel's influence at the War Office might even persuade its officers they were transporting government papers. Helena adjusted the causeway plan. Bellamy would take 4 constables across the marsh. Rowan would bring 2 unarmed harbour officers who knew the cutter's crew, and Helena would identify the stolen plate and forged bonds. You will remain behind, Rowan said instinctively. She looked at him until he corrected himself. No, forgive me. You determine your own part. It was a small change, too late to restore trust, but not too late to matter. Shortly before midnight, The riders entered the marsh in single file. Helena guided them by the old survey markers, counting each raised stone beneath the horses' hooves. Halfway across, they found Matthew Pike, hiding inside an abandoned salt hut. His face was bruised, but the proof print remained sewn into the lining of his coat. Cross had caught him near Gannet Beck and forced him into the canal carriage. Matthew escaped when the first explosion frightened the horses. He had overheard Cross say that the missing copper plate and the forged bonds were locked inside a black naval dispatch chest aboard the Argent. Bellamy examined the proof, recorded Matthew's injuries, and placed the sheet inside his evidence case beside Crane's tally board. Rowan read the handwritten alterations in the margin. "This is Cross's hand," he said. "He wrote my political correspondence for 6 months. I would swear to it before Parliament." "And the instruction to destroy the proof?" Helena asked. "His as well." For the first time, Rowan understood that Helena's management had protected far more than his income. Her records, measurements, and insistence upon custody had been the estate's defense against men who relied upon noblemen signing faster than they read. "Everything they stole from you became a weapon against Caldermere," he said. "Everything you dismissed," she replied. A flash appeared from the harbour side of the marsh. One lantern raised twice and lowered once. Crane stiffened. "That is the canal company's signal for recovered documents." Someone at the vicarage, or among the displaced tenants, had reported their discoveries. Minutes later, flames rose beyond the harbour warehouses. Sabine had learned that Helena possessed the proof print and tally board. The canal office was burning, destroying the official watchbook needed to authenticate Crane's notches, while the Argent prepared to sail with the copper plate and bonds aboard. Then Bellamy opened his evidence case and stopped. The proof print remained inside, but Crane's tally board had vanished during their halt at the salt hut. In its place lay a strip of Black Widow's silk and a note in Sabine's hand. "Bring Helena to the cutter alone, or the boy's master hangs for her forgery." Bellamy closed the evidence case and examined its lock. It had not been forced. During the halt at the salt hut, he had opened it to secure Matthew's proof print, while Constable Hale held the lantern and the other men searched the building. Hale was now missing. His horse's tracks led toward the harbour. "He took the tally board and carried Sabine's note before joining us," Helena said. "She placed a man inside the magistrate's party before the warrants were issued." Bellamy's face hardened. "I appointed him 6 months ago, on Sir Lionel's recommendation." The same network reached from the War Office to the Canal Office and into the County Constabulary. Helena read Sabine's note again. The threat concerned Matthew's master, printer Abel Rook, not Matthew himself. If Rook were forced to confess that Helena had supplied the false copper plate, the surviving proof could be dismissed as part of their conspiracy. "I am not going to that cutter alone," Helena said. "Sabine expects me to behave like a frightened wife protecting her reputation. We will let her believe I have done so." Bellamy and his constables remained concealed among the salt huts, while Helena, Rowan, Matthew, and Crane continued toward the harbour. Rowan wanted Matthew left behind, but the boy refused. "Mr. Rook kept me when no other printer would take an orphan," he said. "I will not hide while they hang him with my silence." Helena gave him a choice rather than an order. Matthew elected to stay with Bellamy until summoned. At the fisherman's landing, Helena boarded a small skiff with Rowan, concealed beneath a tarred canvas near the bow. Crane rowed them through the dark water, while Bellamy's men approached the harbour overland. Flames consumed the upper floor of the canal office, casting red light across the quay. Townspeople, sailors, investors, and labourers crowded behind the harbour watch. The destruction was public, exactly as Sabine intended. She stood aboard the Argent, beside Sir Lionel and Cross, dressed once more in widow's black. Abel Rook knelt near the mast with his hands bound. Constable Hale guarded him. On the quay, a customs officer held a proclamation accusing Helena of forging military maps, manipulating canal shares, abducting a witness, and inciting the destruction at Gannet Beck. The document bore the Caldermere seal. They have turned every act of resistance into evidence against me, Helena murmured. Because I gave them the authority to do it, Rowan said beneath the canvas. The admission contained no request for comfort. Crane brought the skiff alongside the cutter. Helena climbed the boarding ladder alone. "Release Mr. Rook," she said. Sabine smiled. "Give me the printer's proof. You already stole Crane's tally. A piece of wood proves nothing without the watchbook, and the watchbook is presently becoming ash." Behind her, Cross held the black naval dispatch chest Matthew had described. Sir Lionel rested one hand upon its lid. Helena could not see whether the missing copper plate and forged bonds remained inside. "The proof in exchange for Rook," Helena said. She produced the folded sheet, but kept one hand around it. Sabine ordered Hale to bring the printer forward. Rook's face was bruised, and dried blood marked his collar. "Do not give it to her," he whispered. "She made me sign a confession." Cross displayed the confession to the crowd on the quay. It declared that Helena had commissioned an imitation of her own military plate, then ordered Rook to produce false canal prospectuses so she could ruin Caldermere and acquire the land cheaply. Sabine raised her voice. "You see how desperately she purchases loyalty. First an apprentice, then a surveyor, now a printer willing to perjure himself for her money." The spectators began to murmur. Investors who had applauded Helena's soil test now watched her as though every warning had been market manipulation. The attack no longer threatened only her liberty. If the confession stood, her separate trust could be seized to satisfy the canal debts, and anyone who had helped her might be prosecuted as an accomplice. Helena held out the proof. Hale released Rook and reached for it. Before he could take the sheet, Rowan threw off the canvas, climbed aboard, and struck the constable's pistol from his hand. Bellamy's men emerged along the quay, but sailors loyal to Sir Lionel raised muskets from the cutter's rail. "No one fires," Helena commanded. "A shot could kill Rook or ignite the powder stored below deck." Sir Lionel opened the dispatch chest and removed the missing copper plate. "Stand back, Caldermere. This is War Office property recovered from your wife's confederates." "It was stolen under my roof by a man I permitted to enter," Rowan said. "And the seal on those proclamations was used under authority I knowingly gave you after evidence of forgery had already appeared." Sir Lionel's expression sharpened. "Choose your next words carefully." Rowan turned toward the customs officers, investors, and townspeople gathered on the quay. "I accused my wife before examining the age of the paper used against her. I denied her access to the records that could defend her. I signed a separation order for political advantage, transferred the estate seal to Lady Sabine, and granted Sir Lionel control of the canal despite a forged trustee's authorization, a missing copper plate, and broken custody of the Duchess's accounts. The flood, the bonds, and every order bearing the delegated authority followed from my choices. The public admission destroyed what remained of his political standing and exposed Caldermere to civil claims from investors and tenants." Rowan continued, "I withdraw every accusation I made against Helena. I will personally satisfy the laborers' medical costs, the tenants' losses, and every lawful debt created by my guarantee. I also request a parliamentary inquiry into my conduct and Sir Lionel's involvement. I claim no immunity through my title." Helena heard the crowd's mood change, but Rowan's confession could establish his culpability, not prove Sabine's scheme. Sir Lionel understood the distinction. A husband's guilt does not create his wife's innocence. He snatched the proof sheet from Helena, held it above a deck lantern, and set it alight. Sabine then seized the copper plate from the chest. Before Bellamy's men could board, she threw it over the rail. It struck the water and disappeared beneath the cutter. Cross tossed the forged bonds into the burning canal office, where the collapsing roof buried them beneath flame. By sunrise, the watchbook, proof print, copper plate, and apparent original bonds were gone. Rook and Matthew could testify, but Sabine possessed their coerced confession and the public narrative of Helena manipulating land values. She appeared to have won. Bellamy arrested Hale, but Sabine, Sir Lionel, and Cross claimed protection as passengers aboard a government cutter carrying military correspondence. The cutter's lieutenant refused to surrender them without a superior warrant. He delayed sailing only until noon, when a naval commander would arrive to decide jurisdiction. Helena stood on the quay, watching fragments of the proof print turn to ash. Near her boot lay one unburned corner, blackened along two edges. It contained no words, only a row of tiny punctures made by the printer's registration pins. Rook noticed her studying them. "Those holes align the paper over a copper plate," he said. "Every press places them differently." Helena looked toward the three surviving plates inside Bellamy's wagon. Her father had designed their registration holes in an uneven 5-point pattern, so one workshop's sheets could never be mistaken for another's. The burned proof bore 4 evenly spaced punctures. It had not been printed from Helena's press. More importantly, the false military maps already submitted to the magistrates retained their full margins. Their pinholes could identify the press that produced them, even without the stolen plate. Helena then remembered Sabine's boast. The tally board was worthless without the watchbook. Sabine could only know the board's evidentiary purpose if Hale had described it, or if she had seen the corresponding book before ordering it burned. At a public creditors' hearing, Helena could force Sabine to authenticate one of 2 watchbook copies, each containing a different hidden discrepancy. Whichever version Sabine rejected would reveal knowledge available only to the person who altered the original. Helena closed her fingers around the burned corner. "Let the cutter remain until noon," she told Bellamy. "Call every investor, tenant representative, customs officer, and canal director to the old customs house at 10. Announce that we recovered a duplicate watchbook and 1 surviving bond." Rowan looked at her. "Neither exists." "Precisely. Sabine destroyed the evidence she understood. Now I shall offer her evidence that never existed, and let her tell us exactly what the real documents contained." Helena refused to let the customs house hearing become another room controlled by Caldermere. Magistrate Bellamy placed neutral constables at every entrance, searched the galleries, and assigned separate guards to Matthew Pike, Abel Rook, Thomas Reed, and Josiah Crane. Constable Hale was confined in a locked chamber at the county jail. Every document was numbered in the presence of the vicar, the Bristol banker, and 2 tenant representatives before being placed on the central table. Helena prepared no forged evidence. Instead, she created 2 clearly labeled reconstruction sheets from Crane's recollection of the destroyed watchbook. One stated that 6 sealed bonds had left the canal office on March 14th. The other placed the same transaction on March 16th. Only Crane knew which date he remembered cutting into the stolen tally board. Helena also prepared a blank specimen bond on ordinary paper. It bore no signature or seal and was marked across its face, "Comparison copy, not an original." Bellamy understood the trap. He would announce only that the court possessed reconstructed records and a bond specimen. If Sabine supplied details absent from the public evidence, those details would become testimony to her prior knowledge. At 9:30, the old customs house filled with investors, laborers, tenants, harbor officials, and townspeople drawn by news of Rowan's confession. The lieutenant of the Argent brought Sabine, Sir Lionel, and Cross under naval escort. They were not yet prisoners, but the cutter would not sail while Bellamy's warrants remained under review. Sabine entered first, wearing widow's black and Helena's stolen chatelaine. Its presence no longer wounded Helena. It looked instead like an inventory of Sabine's mistakes. Sir Lionel attacked before Bellamy finished opening the proceedings. "This hearing is an attempt by a disgraced wife and a frightened husband to transfer their failures onto servants of the crown. The Duchess fabricated competing surveys, manipulated land values, concealed an apprentice accused of theft, and incited resistance to lawful construction. Her printer has confessed." Cross placed Abel Rook's signed confession on the table. Bellamy admitted it provisionally, but recorded Rook's claim that it had been obtained through beating and threat. Sir Lionel then produced the first military map recovered from the smugglers. Her mark appears here. Her measurements appear here. Her own husband can identify both. Rowan stood. I can identify the map as derived from Helena's work. I cannot testify that she printed, supplied, or authorized this copy. Did you accuse her of doing so? I did. Did you believe the accusation? Rowan looked across the crowded room. I chose to believe it before completing the tests she requested. That choice gave Lady Sabine the seal and gave you control of the canal. It does not make the accusation true. Helena did not allow his confession to substitute for evidence. She placed the map beneath her father's brass magnifier and invited Rook to examine its outer margin. 4 evenly spaced pinholes appeared along the lower edge. She then displayed impressions made from her 3 surviving copper plates. Each sheet bore 5 holes in an irregular pattern. Could my press have produced the smuggler's map? She asked. Not with that margin, Rook said. Your press uses 5 registration pins. Mine uses 4. Whose press produced this copy? Mine. Murmurs moved through the room. Sir Lionel smiled thinly. Then the printer has confessed to manufacturing it. At whose instruction? Helena asked. Matthew stepped forward under Bellamy's protection. He testified that Cross had delivered Helena's copper plate to Rook's shop, ordered 2 versions of the canal prospectus, and threatened to accuse Rook of stealing the plate if he refused. Rook confirmed the account. Cross called them paid liars. Helena answered by laying the predated demolition order beside the prospectus. The handwritten change describing limestone sloped upward and ended every capital letter with a hooked stroke. Bellamy produced 6 examples of Cross's correspondence, obtained from Rowan's library before the Canal Office fire. The same hook appeared in each. Rowan authenticated the letters only as papers Cross had written while serving Sir Lionel. He offered no conclusion about the match. That reasoning belonged to Helena and the magistrate. Next came the chain of authority. Helena presented the visitor's card, delivered to Briar Cottage before the hearing, the one impressed with Caldermere's genuine seal, 2 days before Rowan officially transferred it to Sabine. Cobb testified that he had received the card directly from Helena and kept it after the demolition warning. Lady Sabine, Helena said, if you possessed no authority before the hearing, how did your land agent obtain an authentic impression of the seal? He was not my agent. Then why did he ask to purchase the exact ground later pledged under documents bearing your management authority? Anyone could have sent him. Helena produced the list found inside Sabine's red Morocco case. The 6 pledged properties included Gannet Beck, Briar Cottage, and the flooded farms. The vicar, Cobb, and Rowan confirmed where the list had been found. Sir Lionel objected that the paper could have been planted. Helena did not argue. She moved to the prospectus fraud. Thomas Reed described the peat beneath Gannet Beck and the demolition stakes placed before Helena created her decoy map. The independent engineer reported that the iron rod had sunk its full length without touching stone. The construction order nevertheless described limestone and authorized blasting 40 minutes before high tide. The flood was not an accident, Helena said. It was intended to destroy the ground before an inspection could expose the false prospectus. My north sluice diverted the surge into my own barley fields. That sacrifice saved the tenants and preserved the exposed peat for examination. Sabine laughed softly. How noble. Yet the canal watchbook proving your theory burned with the office, and Crane's childish tally has vanished. You possess no record showing that 6 bonds left the building on March 14th. The room went silent. Bellamy had not announced either reconstructed date. Helena had not displayed the sheets. They remained face down beneath his hand. Why March 14th? Helena asked. Sabine's smile disappeared. It was the date mentioned in the recovered copy. No date has been mentioned. Bellamy turned over both reconstruction sheets, revealing March 14th on one and March 16th on the other. Nor have we claimed either is a recovered copy. Sabine looked toward Cross. That involuntary glance carried more weight than outrage. Helena continued. March 14th was the date Crane cut 6 notches into his tally board. You knew it because you saw the official watchbook before ordering the office burned. You also knew the tally required the book for comparison. which is why Hale stole it. Sir Lionel rose. A verbal error is not proof of forgery. No, Helena agreed. It proves prior knowledge. The bond paper will establish the rest. Bellamy lifted the blank comparison bond, making its warning label visible to the entire room. This is not offered as an original, Helena said. It tests what the accused know about originals they claim never to have seen. Sir Lionel glanced at it only once. Sabine, desperate to recover authority, stepped closer. That specimen proves nothing. The genuine canal bonds were printed on Dutch paper with blue silk threads, not common English stock. Helena let the statement settle. No public prospectus described the bond paper. No investor had received an original. The 6 disputed bonds had supposedly burned in the canal office, and Sabine denied participating in their preparation. How do you know about the blue threads? Helena asked. Sabine's face went white. Cross moved toward the side door, but Bellamy's constables blocked him. At that moment, 2 harbor men entered, carrying a dripping rope sling. The tide had fallen beneath the Argent, and beneath the place where dozens of witnesses saw Sabine throw Helena's copper plate, the men had recovered not one object but 2, the missing military plate and a sealed metal bond case caught between the key pilings. Bellamy placed the case on the evidence table without opening it. The genuine Caldermere seal impression remained intact across its clasp. Rowan could authenticate the fracture through the engraved stag's hind leg. Rook could identify the paper and printing pattern inside. Crane could compare any surviving bond numbers with the cuts he had made before his tally was stolen. Helena looked at Sabine. You told this room the originals used Dutch paper threaded with blue silk. If this case contains bonds matching that description, bearing numbers corresponding to Crane's account, and impressions made before Rowan granted you lawful authority, then only one question remains. Whose hand used the seal? Bellamy broke the wax and lifted the lid. Everyone in the customs house leaned forward as he drew out the first blue-threaded bond and turned its signature page toward the light. Bellamy raised the first bond toward the customs house windows. Blue silk threads ran through the Dutch paper, exactly as Sabine had described. Along the lower margin, 4 registration holes matched Abel Rook's press. Crane identified the serial number as the first of 6 documents entered into the canal office on March 14th. The bond purported to carry Rowan's signature, witnessed by Sabine Wycliffe 3 weeks before Rowan publicly granted her authority. I never signed this, Rowan said. Helena examined the signature beneath her brass magnifier. At first glance, it was exact, too exact. She requested the canal authorization Rowan had genuinely signed the previous evening and placed both signatures beneath the same transparent measuring grid. Every line coincided, including a tiny hesitation where Rowan's pen had caught in the paper. A person never signs twice with absolute mechanical precision, Helena explained. This signature was transferred from the genuine authorization by placing a graphite-coated sheet beneath it and tracing the lines onto the earlier bond. Under angled light, Bellamy saw the indentation left by a blunt stylus. Faint graphite remained beneath the ink. The supposed earlier signature had therefore been created after Rowan signed Sir Lionel's instrument. But the bond is dated 3 weeks ago, the Bristol banker said, because the conspirators needed investors to believe the debt existed before the project came under suspicion, Helena replied. They sealed blank bonds with the stolen Caldermere seal, printed false dates, and added Rowan's copied signature only after he supplied them with a genuine model. Sabine attempted to deny witnessing the documents, but her initials appeared on all 6. Helena compared them with the false letter planted in her green ledger. The same inward hook ended each final stroke. Rook then identified the bonds as sheets Cross had ordered him to print secretly after the 2 canal prospectuses. When Rook protested, Cross threatened to accuse him of stealing Helena's copper plate. Matthew described the night Cross delivered that plate in its locked case and substituted oak boards before returning the case to Caldermere. The missing reserve key register had been a second layer of protection, intended to suggest the plate was stolen after its return if anyone discovered the empty compartment. The military accusation served two purposes, Helena said. It removed me from the archive before I could examine the printing marks, and it persuaded Rowan to give Sabine the authority she had already pretended to possess. Dane was brought from confinement under guard. Faced with the recovered bonds, Lord Marsh's physician, and the false authorization bearing his hand, he admitted that gambling debts had placed him under Sir Lionel's control. He had supplied details of Helena's marriage settlement, imitated Lord Marsh's signature, and advised Sabine which southern properties were not entailed with the dukedom. Sabine had targeted those lands because they could be mortgaged separately, if Helena's trust protections were neutralized. The imaginary bridge and warehouse were never meant to become useful structures. They existed to inflate surrounding land values, attract subscriptions, and justify preliminary bonds. The demolition at high tide would destroy the unstable ground, create an insurance claim, and leave Caldermere and Helena's trust responsible for the debts, while Sir Lionel escaped with the deposits. Sabine's stolen chatelaine had been more than a public humiliation. 3 days before the hearing, she had taken it from Helena's dressing room so that servants would accept her as the incoming household authority. The military plate, however, had been stolen earlier by Cross while it was lawfully in his possession. Helena's 3 decoy surveys had exposed the conspirators' interest in Gannet Beck, but they had not caused the plan. The predated stakes, visitor's card, and demolition order proved the scheme already existed. Bellamy ordered Sabine, Sir Lionel, Cross, Dane, and Hale held for formal examination on charges arising from forgery, fraud, theft, coercion of witnesses, malicious destruction, and conspiracy. The naval lieutenant surrendered Sir Lionel once the recovered military plate disproved his claim that the cutter carried lawful War Office property. Rook's coerced confession was entered as evidence of intimidation rather than guilt. Matthew received the magistrate's protection, and Bellamy formally recorded that taking the proof sheet to preserve evidence did not make the boy part of the forgery. Sabine looked toward Rowan as the constables approached. "You gave me the seal. You signed the authority. Without you, none of this could have happened." "That is true," Rowan said. The room quieted. He did not hide behind her crimes. Before the same magistrates, investors, and tenants who had heard him accuse Helena, he withdrew every allegation against her and named his own failures, refusing the watermark examination, denying her access to her records, valuing Sir Lionel's patronage above verification, transferring authority after discovering a forged trustee's document, and confining Helena when she tried to protect a witness. He resigned every canal office he held and submitted his conduct to the parliamentary inquiry he had requested. From his unentailed personal property, he established funds for the injured labourers, the flooded tenants, Rook's ruined printing business, and the restoration of Helena's salt meadow. His political appointment was permanently lost. Several creditors required him to sell his London residence and 2 profitable hunting properties to satisfy the guarantees he had signed. Those consequences belonged to him, not to Sabine. Helena's green ledger was restored to her legal custody. Dane's removal allowed the trust court to appoint 2 independent trustees, selected with Helena's consent. Briar Cottage, Gannet Beck, and the Southern Revenues were publicly confirmed as her separate property, free of the fraudulent bonds. Rowan executed a deed of indemnity, protecting her trust from every canal debt, and agreed to separate maintenance, without claiming control over her residence, correspondence, work, or companions. Only after those repairs were complete did he ask whether their marriage possessed any future. "Not the marriage we had," Helena said. "You did not merely doubt me. You chose to make me defenseless because my defense inconvenienced your ambition. I know. Knowing is the beginning of accountability, not the end of it." She chose to live separately at Briar Cottage. She did not promise forgiveness, return to Caldermere Hall, or permit his remorse to become another claim upon her. If Rowan wished to write, he could send 1 letter each month, containing an honest account of the restitution work, and no request for an answer. Whether she ever responded would remain her decision. 3 months later, The county gathered again in the customs house, this time to establish an independently governed harbour and drainage board. Helena was elected its first survey director. Matthew became her apprentice. Rook received a new press. Reed supervised the rebuilding of the North Sluice, and Crane became keeper of the board's records under a rule requiring 2 witnesses whenever its seal was used. Rowan attended from the public gallery and spoke only when asked to authenticate his restitution accounts. After the meeting, he approached the evidence table, carrying the silver household keys Helena had surrendered at the opening hearing. He placed them before her, without assuming she would take them. Helena separated 2 keys from the ring, one belonging to her father's engraving press, and the other to Briar Cottage. She returned the keys of Caldermere Hall to Rowan. Then she removed Sabine's stolen chatelaine, now released from evidence, and laid it beside them. "I have no wish to wear another woman's chain," she said. Rowan accepted the words without asking what they meant for him. At Briar Cottage that evening, Helena fitted the press key into its lock and opened the repaired iron frame. On the work table waited a new copper plate showing Gannet Beck, the restored sluice, and the salt meadow that had saved 3 farms. Rowan's latest monthly account lay unopened beside it. Helena was not ready to answer him, but neither was she required to decide her entire future that night. She placed the cottage key in her own pocket, rolled ink across the plate, and pulled the press lever down with both hands. When she lifted it again, the first clean map of land governed in her own name lay beneath her.